The Madlanga Commission of Inquiry also resumes today after a week-long break. The Commission says the pause was necessary to give evidence leaders time to prepare for what is said to be the next phase of testimony, which involves highly sensitive material as well as complex witness arrangements. Evidence leaders are expected to apply for parts of the hearings to be held behind closed doors, excluding journalists and members of the public. Our very own Zianda Ngobo is live from the Bridget Mabandla Justice College in Pretoria, where the Commission is sitting. Zianda, it's been a busy couple of days for everyone, including yourself. And today is said to be another busy one, but it's going to be different, shall we say, as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Well. We're not sure if this Madlanga Commission recess was a recess for some of us journalists, given the news cycle over the last couple of days. Raids at homes, confiscation of gadgets, and more testimony from Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi and Fanny Mosamola at that ad hoc committee. So when proceedings kick off today, we'll get a sense of whether or not the Commission will grant the next witness their application to present their evidence in camera. But as usual, Arabella, I'm never alone. I've got Eldred de Klerk.
Good morning.
Good morning, a crime and security expert. I mean, last week, what were you doing when everything was unfolding in the news cycle?
I was actually trying to avoid the circus, first and foremost.
Yeah.
I think it kind of went a little off script from what we expected.
Yeah.
But the interesting part of it was the cross-examination, which of course we haven't seen yet at the Madlanga Commission. We would hope that the cross-examination that happens here also happens in public.
Which explains why then, because there is a view in the public that there seems to be more that is coming out of the ad hoc committee versus what's happening here. So it's a very important point that you make, that it's because there's cross-examination at that ad hoc committee. I want to also touch on the fact that, you know, how are other witnesses like Sheldrick Sibia, who is at the ad hoc committee today, supposed to prepare when they've had their gadgets confiscated? I mean, this presents a picture of a South African police service that's at war with itself.
Well, the interesting part of it is that we were told that there's already an ironclad case,
Yes.
at least on defeating the ends of justice, against him, right? And so why go after his gadgets when you already supposedly have the evidence? It's a little kind of after the fact. You've accused him, you instituted a case against him, you've instituted disciplinary procedures, and now you say, let's go find the evidence. So we're not quite sure about the sequence of events as it happens. If he's prejudiced by the fact that there was action taken against him,
He being Sheldrick Sibia.
Sheldrick Sibia, then of course, he needs to say that to Parliament, and Parliament needs to take that into account as he delivers his testimony.
And also, since Mkhulu's home was raided, we had a chief of staff. I never thought I'd ever see a chief of staff holding a briefing, but that's exactly what happened last week, where Sheldrick Ngabinde also had his own briefing, telling us that he also believes his life is in danger. And this is very important for what happens here, because this, yes, it's an inquisitorial kind of exercise, but it's very telling of what exactly is happening within the South African police service, and perhaps, Eldred, just how far they need to go. Yes, they've got terms of reference, but perhaps maybe a change of tact a bit?
Well, indeed, because what I think both Parliament and the Madlanga Commission is going to learn is what the culture of policing is. That, and we've said it before, that you can have all the prescripts, all the legislation, the institutional culture determines how things happen. And part of that culture has always been oppressive and repressive, simply because it's such an authoritative institution, and it's a structure that's hierarchical. Somebody gives you a command, it's supposed to be executed.
Yes.
Now we already had the whole debacle about, and now the utterances that what the ministers sought to do was unlawful. Yet we've never had a court of law, or even the Constitutional Court, clarify the powers vis-a-vis the minister and the executive and the National Commissioner, and we hope that Parliament will take that step and clarify that. So the culture of the police is such that people take revenge. They have long memories, and there's recrimination and counter-recriminations. So we have a long way to go to find out the truth of what exactly is happening within the institution. But is it imploding? Yes, it is.
Right before our eyes,
Absolutely.
dare I say. And speaking of Minister Mkhunu, I mean, he was even at the funeral of Nathi Mthethwa yesterday. We understand that he's instituted legal proceedings against has sent lawyers to find out where the warrant of arrest, or the warrant not of arrest, I beg your pardon, jeez, where the warrants to actually the search and seizure at his home came from, and whether it was legitimate. Now, if you have a minister who is on a leave of absence having to do that over the South African police service that he was meant to be instituting policy over, that's also quite telling. I mean, it's almost like a cloaks and daggers kind of moment that we found ourselves in.
Absolutely, and it's actually bending procedures, a little blurring the lines here, because if I go raid somebody's home, firstly, they should be present, ideally, because the inventory that you take of the things that you walk away with, they should be witnessing the raid as such. So what we believe is that the minister wasn't home. We also know that the minister's house, all ministers' homes, are secure facilities.
By the South African Police
Service. So this was blue on blue, saying to you that no, you can't come in because the host and the resident is not here. We have a responsibility to guard this establishment and the integrity of it, and you can't just walk in and take somebody's toys. So it is hugely problematic that that step was even taken. And remember, that step can't be taken without prior knowledge of the National Commissioner, who says that he was merely informed that this was happening.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also, I think we'll have that conversation a bit later about also those whose homes were raided believe they were being intimidated because it was members of the National Intervention Unit and the Special Task Force. So we'll get to whether or not that's normal. But I want us to just quickly sum up how everything that happened last week that we've just discussed, the possible impact that it will have for the Madlanga Commission.
Well, the Madlanga Commission now needs to say, are we resourced, and do we have the capacity and capability to deal with what the mandate we've been given? And we've already explored some of this, and some of us believe they don't. Do they have the necessary researchers, forensic experts, the analysts, to actually go and take stock of what's been said, where it's been said, and how it affects their purview? Because they have a lot more inquiry to do, and some of that needs to happen outside the commission or alongside the commission. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to come and sit at the commission. They can be interviewing people, they can be taking affidavits, and they can be receiving submissions that actually seeks to further their mandate. Whether they have the capacity to do so, we have yet to learn from the commission, and we hope that the commissioners speak up. We've already had the evidence leader, the former evidence leader, say that, that he's a little concerned. So we hope that the commissioners, actually, they've had a bit of a recess, they've done some planning, we were told, and now it's up to them to actually speak up and say, do we need additional capacity, and can we fulfill our mandate without additional help?
And operational transparency is one of the issues that Terry Motau had actually raised when he pulled out of the Madlanga Commission. They say one day is a long time in politics. Imagine an entire week, Arabile, just reflecting on what was happening during the Madlanga Commission recess that will have an impact on the work that is done here at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. Arabile.
It's really, truly fascinating machinations that you guys have both unpacked there. And I mean, what does it actually mean for some of those raids when...
Cedric Nkabinde or Senzo Mkhunu, all those raids taking place during the recess of this very Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. It does have a material impact on what happens here, because at Sibia's home there was a search and seizure where gadgets were confiscated. And so we may or may not also hear further from from Sibiya at that ad hoc committee about what impact this may have had in terms of preparing for that process. And so far as what happens this morning, as you've already mentioned, the witness who's meant to take the stand today has made an application to have their evidence given in camera behind closed doors. And there are different layers or different types of in-camera testimony that can be given. And that's why Eldred de Klerk will help me once more unpack what the difference is and how can the Commission ensure that whatever this particular witness says will be made public, or we will at least know what has been said.
Well, that's the interesting part. So when when you meet with the spokesperson of the Commission, please ask him that question. Conventionally, what it means is that there's a number of ways. You can distort the voice of the witness, and you can blur the image of the witness, yet you still get access to what's been said. So that's one way. The other one is completely behind doors, and you get, if not a summary, but you get the highlights of it. And you may get, after a series of in-camera witnesses, there may be a compilation of what's been said, but it's not attributed to any one particular person. But you get the gist. So we need to know what capabilities the Commission has and what resources it has to be able to ensure that there's a continuity in the story. Because what happened at the ad hoc committee gave us a little bit of an insight into how robust or just how cross-questioning can go into areas that wasn't necessarily foreseen.
And areas that wouldn't have necessarily have been
in somebody's affidavit even, because the witness would say, that's not in my affidavit, I've been asked the question under oath and I'm going to answer it. So we were starting to see, unfortunately it got into personalities. We started getting names of people, and what we have to remember, everybody's entitled to due process. We live in a constitutional democracy. And if in what's been said about me is going to undermine my integrity or impugn my integrity, that's a problem. Or it erodes my ability to defend myself because I've already been defamed or potentially defamed, or things have already been said, or my gadgets have been taken, my ability to defend myself. Also, I don't have, in terms of due process, I need to get access to what does my accuser know if this was a conventional court of law. So we keep coming back to the fact that this is an inquisitorial process rather than a court of law, which means that you inquire, you reveal the truth, and basically everybody gets to tell their story from their side.
Okay, so, we know that here at the Madlanga Commission, this is a process that was instituted by the executive through President Cyril Ramaphosa, and what's happening in Parliament is the legislative arm, and it's the lawmakers also trying to get to the bottom of the allegations that were made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. But what we've seen taking place is, of course, the fact that in Parliament, there seems to be more cross-examination. Here, evidence has been led. But there is a sense that, maybe the proceedings here are being run over or being taken over by the events taking place in Parliament. Is there necessarily a need to reconcile or almost move at the same pace? Very aware, of course, that these are two separate arms of the state.
Absolutely. And the difficulty is that with cross-examination and with MPs sitting there, not necessarily singing from the same hymn sheet, each with their own interest, each with their own set of questions, they are basically, it's a free-for-all and a free terrain. So the questions can go in any direction. The difficulty with Parliament is that we mustn't lose sight of what Parliament is able to do. And that is, we mustn't lose sight with our Parliament, apologize. We mustn't be able to, Parliament can look at the legislative component, how there may have been policy failures and legislative failures. They also need to look at what the question we haven't answered, which is whether there was executive overreach. We haven't actually answered that question.
Yes.
There's a claim that the directive was unlawful, but there's no determination about that. Parliament can also start looking at the institutional arrangements and failures of judiciary and the police. So if Parliament sticks into those lanes and not go into the granular detail of who did what to when, who, then Parliament, within its limited scope of a month on which they have to return, are able to achieve that. And I'll have every confidence that they can then start putting these institutions on the right path if they stick to what they are able to do and what they're able to deliver on.
Eldred de Klerk, we're still together throughout the rest of the morning.